So, we are knee-deep in our series based on Martha Creek's book, Presence and Potential. And if you have never met or seen Martha Creek before, you have a treat because she will be here in person next Sunday. So feel free to invite friends to come and join together to experience her in person. And if you have not yet signed up for her workshop, you can still do that next Sunday. But if you do it in advance today, you can find that information on the app. And in the order of service, that little tab named OOS. And you can also find that on our website or more information at our welcome table after the service. But her workshops are well attended because she always does good work and people go back to them over and over. It's not one of those things you go to once and you say, I did that. It's kind of the work that unfolds as you go. So I invite you to do that. This week, we're on chapters 14 through 16. If you're not reading the book, don't worry. You're not going to miss anything. It's all kind of encapsulated here. But if you would like to, you can go back and check out the old YouTubes, the past talks on this topic to catch up with the book. And if you'd like to share those with others, you can. Because you know the number one way to grow a ministry and to grow a community is what? Is it the minister shouting from a rooftop? No. Is it putting an ad on Facebook? No. Is it, does anyone know? It's word of mouth. It's you. It's word of mouth, and it's also like vision of sight. It's people seeing how you live your life and going, what's going on with her? What's going on with them? And it's letting people know. It's not keeping it or hiding it under a bushel basket, but letting people know. So this week is about I consider it about grounding. The whole concept that we're talking about this week is about grounding. Anyone ready for more grounding in their lives? Yeah, get grounded. And not like you're a child, get grounded. But so this week it's contain your own reactivity when others are reacting. Nice idea, right? Take a stand and be less anxious. Do not confuse closeness with sameness. So my little one is in kindergarten, and she's been learning a lot in kindergarten. She now knows the B word, she knows the F word, and just this last week she learned a new thing, and we call it the bird. Now, I kid you not, this is kindergarten these days. She likes to talk when she's going to sleep at night, and she just lifted up her beautiful little finger, and she goes, Mama, are there any little ones in the house? Just one that's too little to see, but she goes, Mama, what does this mean? And I said, well, sweetie, it's another way of saying that F word that we talked about the other night. It's a way of saying that, but it's a way of, without saying the words, it's a way of saying it. And it's also a way of punching someone in the face without doing it. And we talked a little bit more about this sign language that she's learning in school. Thank you, public school system. And we talked a little bit more about it, and because I wanted to get an idea of where it's coming from, And she said that this one was a little boy in her classroom, and I forget the details of how he was sharing it. But I said, that's interesting. And she said, yeah, he learned it from his daddy, who gave that to his neighbor out the window. And I said, well, that's great. That's great. So this is what it means, and it's like hitting someone. Ronald Reagan said, all great change in America begins at the dinner table. All great change in America begins at the dinner table. In my household, we're bringing that back to life. Because it's important to talk about these things, right? It's important to talk to kids and to talk to ourselves and to talk to our spiritual community about being present, about emotional regulation, about the impact on our oneness of one part, right? What does my part do? How does my family's part, how does my consciousness contribute to the collective, right? Everyone's listening all the time. The other fun words, some she got from the bus. I forget where she got another one. And at least I'm not one of my girlfriends that lives in Colorado to see what her son brought home. You don't even want to know that word. And it was from a family that doesn't speak like that per se, but they have an older sibling that launched a word you would never want to hear come out of a kindergartner's mouth. Much less a kindergartner who if they know that it's a word you don't want to share, what are they going to do? Share it more. And I just told her, for the love of God, he cannot ever say that around us. like I don't know what I'll do. But what's happening around the dinner table in our lives? The dinner table in our own lives. We all have seen road rage. We've all seen a child being spoken to in a way that we hurt for them the moment we hear it. We've all seen online discord, and we've even seen, have we not, presidential debates that, right? Did we ever think we'd live through a time like this? Where we see the way people are showing up? And to think that does not have an impact on the future and future generations, right? I'm realizing more and more, it's like the older I get, the more, it's not conservative in a way, we're not talking politics here, but like the more conservative in a way I'm getting, right? It's like, I don't want things coming out of my mouth. I don't want to pass things on. I want some grounding. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, I want some love, some harmony, some oneness, some consciousness. I want to develop my own emotional regulation, and I would love for the world around me to develop it too, right? I was at Oktoberfest. In Lee Summit, we have quite a big Oktoberfest, and when I told someone I was going to Oktoberfest with my daughter, they said something about the last couple of years and gunshots at Oktoberfest. And I was like, I didn't even know that. But I'm going during the day. I hope that's okay. But do you believe that our world today could benefit from grounding, from some emotional regulation, from knowing how to engage with others, for knowing how not to inflame or enrage something, but to bring it down? Yeah? I think we're all called to be metaphysicians, and there's no day like today to start practicing. I want to share with you a little bit about what Martha Creek says in this chapter on reactivity. She says, imagine what it would feel like and look like to contain your own reactivity when others are reacting. The more jacked up another person gets, the calmer you get. The more confrontational and loud the other is, the more you are able to understand, the more you are able to listen. The more threatening and volatile they might become, the more coherent and aware of your options you become. The more clearly you think, the less reactive you are in response to their reactivity. How does that sound for mastery? How does that sound for the new, how does that sound for the new, power of what's in these days? I always think I want intelligence to get really popular again, really attractive, right? Really intelligent and really attractive. But mindfulness is also incredibly attractive, isn't it? Grounding is incredibly attractive. But it's easier said than done. So what tools do we have to self-regulate for ourselves and in a collective, in an environment? Well, we've heard the go, when they go low, we go high. How about when they go high, we go low? Just ground that in for a moment. When you notice the energy elevating and getting nuts, can you ground and center? Can I become quieter, calmer, more mindful? Just notice that it's a call. It's like turning on the light. If that light goes on and it gets bright, all of a sudden I go dim and I get centered. I get focused. Can we get slow, quiet, calm? We've all heard of breathing breaks. We teach them to kids. We teach them to adults. They're now in psychology rooms and in doctors' offices. But we teach kids, you just draw a star. Take an inhale breath and an exhale breath. Let's do it together. Inhale Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Feel that. It makes a difference. And it's not just for kids. There's one kid's tool that it goes stomp, stomp, breathe. You go, right? Kids love to stomp, especially when they're frustrated. Let's do it together. Stomp, stomp, breathe. Together. You could feel the difference when we emotionally regulate. But we have an animal brain, don't we, right? Like the animal brain, once it's on, right? So we have to find ways to influence the system, influence our own body regulation to get into a grounded state of mind. You can yin-yang them. I just made it up. Yin-yang them. Go into the opposite. Martha Creek says, do the opposite. If someone's being rigid, why not try being flexible? Because what do? Usually if someone's being rigid, we come in more rigid, right? But what if when someone was being rigid, we brought the energy of flexible, right? I'm not going to do yoga. Just bring that energy of flexible. If someone gets angry, what if we just begin to be kind, If someone is heartless, what if we bring compassion? And the next little easier said than done trick to shift it up is another tool, do math. Now, this is not just a math professor's daughter saying this, but if you do math in a moment of emotional upset, in a moment of frustration, if you bring your mind into a math equation, do you know what happens scientifically? You shift out of that state and you shift into a different brain state. So if you're working with someone, whether it's your partner that's in their 80s or whether it's your 6-year-old or your grandchild, think about a math break. Quick, throw it out there. Whether it's yourself, right? Like how often do you know that these are techniques that people throughout time have used to generate creativity, right? It's like there are techniques to step away from something for a while and to go to something entirely different. Mathematicians have used it. Dreamers have used it. They've used it to create inventions. So can we use it to regulate ourselves, to come back? Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. There are two options when we're in an environment that's escalating, when we're in a society that's escalating, right? We can either join it or we can take a stand for something different and lead with oneness. When we join it, we are being led, right? If we engage in it, we become consumed with it, then we're being controlled or directed. We're being shifted by someone else's leadership. Can we instead lead with oneness? Because a system cannot be the same if one part of it shifts. An engagement, a conversation, a relationship cannot be the same if one part of it shifts. Martha Creek says the effects on a system are powerful. Whenever just one of us can be a little less reactive, even when other people are being reactive. Martha's next technique is to take a stand and be less anxious. And the gist of this is how can we stand in who we are, what we believe, stand for what we want? How can we take a stand, but have less attachment to everybody standing with us, right? So it's not debate class. It's not that I'm standing or I'm expressing my position because you must be with me. I must have validation or I must have partnership. I must have buy-in. I must have enrollment. It's a different kind of taking a stand. It's like, can I take a stand because I'm grounded in who I am, what I believe, what I know to the best of my ability in this moment, without attachment to manipulating, coercing, or convincing you of anything. She gives the example of casting a vote. Like, what if you were in a group that was asked to cast their vote and you were to give justifications or reasons why you cast your vote? But it was just about you and your vote, right? It wasn't about convincing anyone else. But we so often go into conversations and beliefs with attachment. Will I be liked? Will I be judged? Will I belong? Can I make them come along with me? But here's a question for us today. What is me? What do I think? What do I believe without any feedback? Now, it's almost actually impossible to do. I mean, a psychologist would probably tell you it's perfectly impossible because we get feedback from the time we breathe. I was reading a book on parenting, and, I was a teacher, so I know I was trained in positive discipline and all that, and then and my girlfriend was telling me, I was reading this book that she bought for me, and she said, it all goes back to positive discipline. We got to give positive discipline, and I'm like, yeah, I know about that. I was trained in that, all those teacher seminar days that you do that. But I was reading this book, and it got into like the deep detail, and it said, even a look, a glance, a small correction, negative feedback. And I was like, oh, for the love of God, that I'm like the negative Nancy, Because the number of times I notice my reactivity just going, right? Just takes one not blown nose, and do you not feel that on your face? Tissue. Clock that as one. What is me without any feedback? No encouragement, no discouragement. Start there. What do I believe? What do I feel? What do I think? What do I say? If there is no one there to encourage me, no one there to discourage me, no one there to shame me, blame me, no one there to lift me up, to love me more, no one there to go, oh, you're like me. We're a group now. No sense of belonging you get, no club membership, no party, no shame, but also no support. What would the impact of that be? For individuals to stand in their own being, their own mind, their own heart, their own spiritual practice. Do you hear and feel how big that is? It seems like a little piece of a chapter in a book, but it is huge. As we demonstrate that, you know what it does? It keeps us off teams and building an army. It keeps us away from building evidence and pushing people away or bringing them to us in a way that controls and manipulates. It makes us come together by our true similarities rather than defining us by our differences. Wouldn't that solve a lot today? If we could be called together by our true similarities rather than be defined by our differences, consider the far-reaching impact of that. The us-them mentality crashed. The herd effect gone. Martha says, don't confuse closeness to sameness. She goes into how, we as humans, we're like, tribal, tribal people. We're community people. We crave closeness. We crave belonging. We crave connection. Even those of us that say we don't like people. I know a lot of you do that. A lot of you are like, I like animals better than people. I'm not going to ask for raised hands, but I know it's getting to be a larger part of the population. We crave closeness, but we also crave our individuality, right? So there's this push and pull in the human psyche and the spiritual self, but we are truly one. We are truly one, so we can never, the more we try to pull away from that, the more we'll be pulled back in, and vice versa. So can we recognize that some of these distinctions and differences, we can just be present to them with less attachment? They don't have to mean the end of the world, right? It doesn't have to mean like, oh, now I think we have something in common. We've solved that. We don't have to think anymore. We don't have to express ourselves anymore, because nothing you could ever do or say is ever going to offend me again, because I know we're on the same side. Crash, right? No more sides. Talk to anyone long enough, you're going to have differences, right? Even people coming from the same household have differences, raised by the same parents in the same town, going to the same school and the same teachers, right? Sometimes such differences they can't even stand to be in the same room with each other. So can we get over the idea once and for all that differences are wrong, and that we can even actually calculate them or conceive them? Right? Everything is based on difference. I mean, even this, the gender phenomena that's going on, the deeper underlying issues around the gender phenomena going on, that's my name for it. That doesn't exist. If you Google that, it's not a thing. But the gender phenomena that's going on is partially because of the people being infuriated by the insistence on differences defining us. I could have much more in common with a man in this sanctuary than with another woman, but I'm classified as woman rather than man, right? But it's just what you look at. And I know that's too heady for a Sunday morning, but it's just what we focus on, right? So we've all decided that this one difference is big enough. We're going to call you all women, and we're going to call you all men. But what about this difference? What about calling us all something that is about the heart, right? That we all have in common. So we have this push and pull, and then we get angry if it's not the same or different, or it's not our definition. We're here based on the principle of oneness. We cannot get away from it. It is science, it's spirituality, it's everything. You can't breathe. We can't exist without everything, all of God, right? I was listening to an Eddie Rabel talk. I had a little drive this morning. I was listening to an Eddie Rabel talk. He's an old school Unity guy, and I loved it because, in Unity we teach that God is everywhere present and God is infinite, and then also individualize the expression of God consciousness in and through and as you. And different people have different ways of expressing this and saying this, but he had a good one this morning. He said, God is infinite, so God is always more than whatever we're talking about. So in whatever way, if you could say God is whatever, God is more, God is more, God is more. And that's the principle of oneness. It's like all of it, all of it. So can we live in it? Martha Creek says that we are here to discover, she said, discover how we can be in relationship without taking over one another. Whoa. To know where I begin and end, to know where you begin and end, and then discovering how we can be in relationship without taking over one another and without being separated out of anxiety and pulled together by anxiety, but rather understanding the flow of it. At times our connection will be close, at times it's going to be separate. She goes on to say we can be close to others and separate from others. It's going to be both and. Regardless of how much another threatens you, wills you, manipulates you, seduces you to stay close, there will always be an innate pull that gives us distance and closeness. So can we honor that? Don Miguel Ruiz said, as a master of self, when I look into the eyes of another individuals, I see another authentic self, a beautiful expression of the divine, no matter where this person is in the process of awakening. I respect that his or her intent is just as powerful as mine, and doing so is an act of unconditional love. If I were to try to control this person, I would be lost in the fog and place conditions on my love and acceptance of him or her. If you see the world through the eyes of conditional love, you are by definition attempting to control others, imposing your will so that they conform to the definition of who and what you think they should be. If they don't agree to your demands, they will receive the punishment of your judgment. This is conditional love in a nutshell. But remember, every time you judge someone, you are punishing that person for not following agreements they never made. As you look back over your life, you can see that many of the relationship battles you thought were for your own personal freedom were really battles of who was going to domesticate whom. And every time you experienced a moment of anger, outrage, indignation, or any other negative emotion as the result of someone else's behavior, you created a dream of villains and victims. And you were once again caught in the drama of the party. Perceiving yourself as a victim and another as a villain doesn't allow you to see the person who is actually standing before you. You don't see their story, their past, their heartbreaks, and how all of that has impacted their life and contributed to forming the person you're talking to. All you can see through the fog of domestication is that the person you have cast as the villain in your story isn't living up to the values you think they should. But when you see another with the eyes of unconditional love, you are then able to clearly see who is actually in front of you. A living being who is trying to survive and thrive in a world filled with domestication and conditional love. Unconditional love allows you to disagree with the choices or beliefs of others while still respecting their right to have them. Practicing unconditional love is the art of the master and mastery of self. Once you have recognized, released, and forgiven the self-judgments that have arisen from your own domestication, then you can recognize and forgive others when they act from their domestication. The person in front of you has been domesticated, and now they want to pass that on to you because it's all they know. However, they can only subjugate you with your permission. And we, in unity and in this spiritual practice of oneness, are here to set each other and to set ourselves free. Namaste.